Good afternoon. Mic's working. My name is Michael Rodriguez, and I'm the Director of Operations for Dual Language Education of New Mexico. So on behalf of our staff, our board of directors, and the many, many volunteers, we want to welcome you to Santa Fe and welcome you to our conference this year. So thank you guys for being here. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about effective leadership for sustaining dual language programs. So we're going to look at some important factors you need to be considering along the way to make sure that your program sticks around much longer than any of us do. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I'm new to dual language education of New Mexico. I've been working with them as a partner since 2003. Previous to working there, I was the director of two dual language schools that I helped start here in Santa Fe, and a dual language K-8 charter school up in Albuquerque. I was one of the school site visits, Cienaguas International School, and I'll be referencing some of the things we did there through the presentation. So that's a little bit about me.
Good afternoon, my name is Adrian Sandoval. I too am with Dual Language Education of New Mexico. I'm one of the probably like 3 or 4 professional development coordinators. A little bit of my background. Previous to this, I was a professional development director for across probably around 5 states for a group entitled Quick and Associates. They represented a number of different publishing companies. And prior to that, I was working for the Center for the Education and Study of Diverse Populations at New Mexico Highlands University in my hometown. I'm born and raised here in New Mexico. Just looking around, this is an incredible facility. Prior to that as well, I was working here at the New Mexico Public Education Department. I was the Title III coordinator for the state of New Mexico. So a lot of things that, I guess some pieces that I bring to the table. And besides that, of course, I'm a teacher, educator, previous bilingual coordinator and director for a district. And just want to say it's a pleasure for me to be here with you.
And obviously as an administrator, I was also a teacher. Started as a special education teacher for middle and high schools. And bilingual education has always been at the forefront of everything that I've done. So the last 14 years being administrator in these programs. So Adrian and I do a lot of presentations together. We go out and do planning retreats for districts and schools to help them start programs. And we're not used to being up on the stage. We're used to being in a classroom or a library or a multipurpose type of facility like that with teams of schools around us. So this is kind of strange for us to be up here on stage.
I feel like singing.
Yeah, and he may. So we have a lot of fun. It's very interactive. Usually when we meet with schools, and we get a lot of work done with them, and it's always a good time. So as I mentioned today, we'll be looking at effective leadership for sustaining programs. A little bit about our organization. As you know, Dual Language Education of New Mexico puts on La Cosecha, but we are nonprofit, and we're very proud of the fact that we're a nonprofit organization. We were started by our executive director, David Rogers, and some other dual language teachers in Albuquerque. La Cosecha started in a library. It was just a group of bilingual teachers coming together for the same purpose, and over the years, it's grown into what we know it as today. Our mission is to develop, support, and advocate for high-quality dual language programs, dual language enrichment education in New Mexico and beyond. So, we were based here in Albuquerque. It's grown through our state, and as I mentioned, we do trainings for schools and districts now across the country to some degree. We're an affiliate of the New Mexico Association for Bilingual Education, and in our strategic plan, we're really about transformative leadership and advocacy. So when we go into schools, we really make sure that the leadership team is not just district and school administrators. A team is really a team to us. So you need to have input from your teachers. You need to have those coaches involved. You need to have program directors, your administrators at the site and district level together when appropriate with your community leaders as well. That's really what helps to sustain programs. We do have a clearinghouse. Our website, you'll find Fuentes 365. Over at the convention center, you'll find information about it as well. We have a whole library of videos. We have books that we publish, Collier and Thomas, which I'm sure many of you guys are familiar with. We publish the books for them. So we're very rooted in dual language education. and quality dual language education. Development K through 12, development of K through 12 dual language models and programs with the collaborative schools in New Mexico and beyond. So we really are about helping work ourselves out of a job. We want schools to be able to function in a high capacity with the resources that they have in their districts. So if you're here today, it's probably because you guys have taken that first step. Either the first step being deciding you want to do a program, maybe you've recently started a program, or maybe you have a program that's been in existence and are now wanting to find out more about what needs to happen because you had that one charismatic person who knows everything and really has pushed that program forward. And I'm talking about me. So you have that one person who the program is dependent on, and your program cannot depend on a person. It's really the team effort behind it, and it goes through all levels.
Thank you. Oh, yes. Our intent today is really to be as succinct and direct and clear as possible. As you can imagine, you're here right now, and you're probably wondering, well, how can we really delve into this and get as much traction as perhaps we desire at the moment within the space of time that we have? Obviously, we've created something that will hopefully support you and guide you definitely, towards that direction of continuous improvement, on reflecting on your program, and really pushing things ahead in a very strong fashion. With that in mind, let me take you to our objectives really quickly. You'll notice that we have, as our first objective, clearly identifying some characteristics of quality dual language programs. And I'll be perfectly honest to you, right now, we won't simply be talking heads today. We definitely want to put your heads together, okay? So keep that in the back of your mind. We want to share with you as well some very clear non-negotiables that exist out there in the dual language world. It's always nice to know, to get a sense of parameters that are around you, so that way you know which way not to go. And so we will be sharing those with you as well. Guiding principles, we put that up there simply because we wanted to make sure that you all have a sense of what are the resources that are available for you. Really quickly, out in the audience, how many of you are familiar with the guiding principles for dual language education? Nice, nice. So I'm getting roughly half to maybe 3/4. Those of you who didn't raise your hands, and even those of you who did, let me ask this question. Those of you who did raise your hands, how many of you use them in a way that supports you along that line or that flow of continuous improvement? I see maybe around 4 to 5 hands. So you can see where we're getting at. So there are resources out there, and as I see the number of hands diminish, I want to begin to challenge you right now to begin to utilize those resources that are intended specifically for that reason. Identification of focus areas for sustainability, and of course focus areas in relation to systems, because obviously if we aren't looking back and reflecting on the systemic issues that are around us, and not just for this program, for our dual language program, we really need to reflect on it when we're thinking about all of our programs, because if we really have our systems aligned for some specific programs that we have out there and not for our dual language program, we need to ask why. We need to begin to recognize within our school sites, within our districts, that program, that our dual language program is worthy of the commitment and the time that all of our other programs are. So really aligning those systems and reflecting on them. And then of course, lastly, looking at a process for using the guiding principles, since the number of hands lessened. Those of you who kept those hands up saying that we do continue to utilize them, feel free to jump by and find somebody who perhaps didn't raise their hands and participate in some good conversation with them. So yes, we will support you through a bit of that process. So really quickly, we are kind of curious about who's present, and yes, this is probably going to make you feel slightly, well, not uncomfortable, but we do want you to get up a little bit, if you don't mind. If you don't want to get up and you just want to turn to the person next to you, we understand that, but we really want to encourage you with, through the spirit of La Cosecha, to network and get to know some of these other people that are in this group today. So if you don't mind, get up and introduce yourself to someone you don't know right now. Hopefully that someone is sitting right next to you. We'll give you a few seconds to do that.
Okay, we're at 90 seconds, so we can start coming back. We'll get back in 15 seconds. About 8 seconds. Maybe 3, 2, how about 1? Okay, thank you guys. Adrian and I were talking up here. It's kind of strange for us. Like we said, we're usually working with the schools and with the conversations and in and out of them. So being up on this stage is a little different for us. But we hope that you're able to make a connection with someone other than who you showed up with or flew in with. This is really an opportunity, as Adrian said, for people to be networking and to find out, as we do when we travel to these different districts, you're not alone, and a lot of the issues you're dealing with are being dealt with in other places, or maybe in some cases have been resolved in other places. So just by a show of hands, how many district people do we have here? Either superintendents, directors. How about site administration, principals, assistant principals? Very good. How about instructional leaders, coaches? Very good. How about our teachers? Most important, teachers. Very good. Well, we're glad that you guys are all here so that you can take this information back to whoever it is that the rest of your team is. It's very critical.
So, I want you guys now, with the same individuals that you're interacting with, I want you to share what you feel are some characteristics of a quality dual language program. So yeah, remember, we're not the talking heads. We want you guys to share that really quickly, get a sense of what your partners know around you. Then, just to let you know, we'll have you guys share out relatively quickly, and we'll move on, all right? I am going to step down, and I'm going to go listen to your conversations.
Okay, so I know these conversations could go on all afternoon, and I'm hoping you're making those connections so that you can continue these maybe for happy hour later on. And we'll come back in about 15 seconds. 8 more seconds. 3, 2, and here's Adrian.
All right, thank you. If I could get a raise of hands really quickly. Yeah, the whole GLAD strategy, right? Thank you. Wonderful job. Yes, I was eavesdropping for a number of seconds there. So what I heard was a number of comments about, classroom teaching, clarity about what needs to be going on in the classroom. And when you have that clarity, obviously those are characteristics of good quality dual language programs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take perhaps maybe six to eight individuals out of this room right now. I'm not going to literally take you physically, but I'm going to select you all, or else actually you're going to self-select. I'd love for you guys to just share really quickly what it is that you talked about regarding characteristics of a strong dual language program. Anybody, really quickly. I'm tempted to jump off. Yes. The quality of teachers, as I had mentioned. I think that's where I may have heard that over there on that side. Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. Absolutely. And you know, when you guys talk about community, hopefully we're thinking both internal, the school community, and the external community as well. Somebody else, please. Yes, right over there, ma'am. Nice, nice. You know, that whole notion of front loading, of scaffolding, of doing some pre-teaching specific to vocabulary, and perhaps that vocabulary's relationship to content concepts. Somebody else out there, I'll take maybe 2 or 3 more, since we're doing it so quickly. Yes. Nice, nice. So, you know, making keeping that line strong, and basically not wavering. We understand what the expectations are when it comes to academic achievement and when it comes to, you know, the pressures of assessment, et cetera, but making sure that, number one, we're very clear about why we selected our dual language program, what research is behind the program that we selected, and how do we develop an elevator speech that's consistent, that's grounded in research, and that we could share with individuals so they understand, and we can support the rest of our groups to hold that line, because what's going to come later is going to be what everybody was hoping for, as long as we have that clarity. Somebody else, take one more, please, sir. Absolutely. Let's be real honest. I think that's why we all come to La Cosecha. That's why I'm here. I'll be honest myself. As an employee of dual language education in New Mexico, I love to come to La Cosecha. I love to go to the breakout sessions because I learn so much. Nobody ever has it all. Your program will never be as high quality as it needs to be. Every year there's certain dynamics that change, whether it be new teachers coming in, whether it be a new principal, and their understanding and their clarity at the district level, new leadership, resources that are needed, understanding of new research that's out there and how to implement it in your classroom. We need, just as we would hope, I'm going to throw this out to you, wouldn't you want the surgeon who's going to do surgery on you to be abreast of the latest in their field? Or do you want them to start cutting on you without knowing it? I want them to be aware. And it's the same thing. You know, the immediacy and the urgency of that career is obvious, but our career spans generations. Our career is amazing. Our career creates those surgeons. And so it's even more imperative that we remain abreast of what's current out there. Let me take this. You guys, in fact, I heard some of you ask out there, well, hey, don't you guys have a list? Yeah, we came up with a bit of a list. And hopefully it rings true with a lot of what you've shared up to this point. If you'll notice, the first one, though, it kind of parallels what you were mentioning, which is, you know, why dual language? Why did you go there at all? If I stepped out into that audience right now and I sat down next to you and I asked you, would you be able to tell me? And no, you don't have to tell me right now, but just think, reflect on that. Because if you don't know, guess what? Your teachers don't know. If you don't know as a district level person, then your principals don't know, and they won't be able to speak to the community that we mentioned a little bit earlier is so important, that we bring in, that we speak with, that we share information with, and that hopefully we utilize as a tool as well to support us with our programs. That brings us next, of course, to a clarity of a vision or a mission. If I stepped out there right now and I asked you guys, what's your mission with your dual language program? Would you be able to tell me what motivated you? And in order of progression, which are the three motivations or four motivations based on your understanding of your stakeholders' needs in your district, in your community, would you be able to outline it? Wow. Think about that and think about how that really clarifies. We talked about having parameters earlier. Think about how that clarifies, provides parameters, and pushes us in a very clear direction. Common understanding of definition of a DL program. This is basic. But I'll tell you what, if you have even minimal turnover in your teachers, you need to make sure that there's a DL 101, a dual language 101 that's consistent out there. Just as was mentioned somewhere out here, you need to keep people abreast of what's going on and how we're doing it. This is the way we do dual language at this school in this district. Knowledge of research, we mentioned that already, the importance of that piece. Stakeholder commitment, input, and partnering. Remember that when we think of stakeholders, particularly when I think of stakeholders, I'm thinking not just our community stakeholders. I'm thinking, obviously, our parents. I'm thinking what we have in our specific school site, particularly if we're functioning as a single strand of dual language education. How do we bring those stakeholders that in some cases could be naysayers about our dual language program into the fold? So they understand and they begin to value what we do as professionals as an asset within their school because we're part of that school community. How do we begin to do that? How do we bring all stakeholders into that fold? Communication. Oh boy, this is one that we run into consistently, right, Mike? Thinking of those stakeholders, thinking of that mission, thinking of a common understanding as to what dual language is in your school site. What is that communication plan? What does that communication look like? How well versed are we? How can we share that with the person, with the legislator that might come and visit our school? How are we going to share that with the superintendent when they come in? How are we going to share that as my superintendents that were sitting in the back? I believe that's where most of you were at. How are we going to share that with the school board? And be that advocate because we know we've read up on the research. That's why we've embraced it. How are we going to share that? Knowing those stakeholders and knowing where their personalities lie. How are we going to do it in a way that affects them and supports us to support them to begin to leverage this program? Articulation of curriculum. Heard it somewhere out here. How clearly articulated is our curriculum K-5, K-8, K-12? So that way, if we have somebody coming in from out of a district that's going to come and teach with us, or even a different school site, supposedly from a similar dual language program, they come in, how are we going to bring them up to speed to our culture of dual language in our school? Is a plan there? If not, then we're kind of rolling the dice. And remember the importance of our career. It's such an incredible career. We shouldn't be rolling the dice with anything. Don't take anything for granted. Materials and resources, I believe I heard it out there as well, and the professional learning that you had mentioned, sir. Both internal and external partners. Remember that you all have at your fingertips an incredible amount of information. Think about right now as you look up at this list that Michael and I just pulled together. We just sat around. We're like, okay, well, what do we always see out there? You guys probably had each and every one of these. You spoke to them in depth. And so don't forget, don't ever think that you always need to go to an external partner to begin to have these deep and important dialogues. You have an incredible amount of knowledge. And the minute you start to recognize that as an asset within your own school as well, just like we need to recognize a language other than English as an asset, that expectation comes up to that level. Those people come up to that level of expectation because we begin to recognize them as true professionals. But let's make sure we're on the same page about a few things before we continue. Okay. Notice that we have, right over here, I'm just going to read this by, it's a bit of a commentary, and it kind of alludes to something else that we're going to be talking a bit later, related to systems. But when there is a lack of clarity, people waste time and energy on the trivial many. I don't know if any of you have been in those situations. I certainly have been part of those as a teacher in goal team meetings. When individuals are just running around thinking about, well, how do we solve the issues that we have in our school? And so it's so important for us to have that clarity that we had mentioned a bit earlier. So here, you guys are probably wondering, well, what were those motivations that support us in creating some of the mission statements that we go and do in some of the states that we visit, that we're invited to. These are the three areas that we kind of push people to think about as they reflect on their mission statements. The first one up here says, well, are you, and right now, you know what, I'll be honest with you, let's go through that same exercise. If you had to do it right now, what order would you put these in, knowing the stakeholders that are in your district or in your school site and the community that school site serves? What order would you put these in? First one says, narrow the achievement gap for English language learners and native English speakers. Number 2, build upon the linguistic and cultural capital of our communities and preserve our heritage. Or number 3, prepare a multilingual, multicultural citizenry that can serve and compete, locally and globally. If you had to, what order would you put those in? Have you defined that? Does that exist within your mission statement in a particular order? Because it's interesting. Sometimes we might be thinking, well, we really want to do this or this, but if we put these ones first, it may not speak to what our core stakeholders want to hear first. And you need to be aware of that political reality. You need to be aware of it. I think anybody here would disagree that any of these three are not good, right? Yeah, all three of them are wonderful reasons for having, or motivations for having, a dual language program. The question is, which of the three, or what sort of order do you put them in? It's interesting to think about. Having clear goals. We had mentioned that a little bit earlier. So here we have some clear elementary goals, you guys. Here's one that actually comes from a presentation that DLNM has done before. It says all students will, at the elementary level, be at or above grade level. Become a bilingual and biliterate by developing high levels of academic proficiency in their second language as well as their first, and demonstrate positive cross-cultural attitudes and behaviors. At the secondary level, the intent, the program goals, could be to attain high academic abilities in both English and the target language, fully bilingual and biliterate, develop multicultural competence, promote student leadership. Such an important piece. By the way, I don't know if you know, but I'm going to put this plug in here right now. Tomorrow, we have a Student Leadership Institute. It's going to be our 8th annual. Last year, we had over 150 students in Albuquerque. Tomorrow, Veterans Day, which is a day of vacation for our students, we have over 120 students coming in. 120 student leaders that are culturally and linguistically diverse, Native American, Hispano, immigrant students that are coming in to our conference, creating their own conference. It's called the Student Leadership Institute for 2016, and we'll be talking about these leadership issues. Why? We all know why. It raises that expectation. It supports them to recognize themselves as true assets, that everything they bring to the table aligns with that dual language program that we're attempting to support them with academically. That there's stuff, the reason they do that and the reason we support them to do that is because we're looking at that longer road, we're looking further down the line and supporting them to become the next leaders within our communities. Here are some non-negotiable components, you guys. These are non-negotiables. In case you don't know. In fact, I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday. They were standing next to me, and they said, you know what, we have a 50-50 program in our middle school. In our elementary school. And this individual said, well, and I asked her, well, so how do you know you have a 50-50? And she started to think, and I told her, break it down into the minutes. And if you truly are 50, English and 50 Spanish, that's going to be a tell. Or an important sign as to whether or not you truly have that 50-50 program within your school. She stopped for a moment. She started to think. She was considering the content areas that they have provide throughout the day, and she's like, we're not 50-50. We're not 60-40, and we're not 70-30. We're less. Wow. So a non-negotiable up here is a minimum of 50% to a maximum of 90% of instruction in the language other than English. Separate spaces for language instruction. Remember, this is different from cross and linguistic transfer. Okay? Make sure that you guys understand the difference. Yes, there are times when we completely separate the languages, and then there are other times when we recognize the similarities, and we support children to recognize the similarities and differences when it comes to the two languages that they're interacting with. And we do that with deliberacy. And that's where we can use the two languages simultaneously to support them. K-12 grade commitment. Ultimately, that long, sure, you're going to start off maybe K1, Sure, you're going to start off there, and you're thinking elementary school, but you know what? If it's good for elementary, why is it not good for mid? And why is it not good for high? And why is it okay for students in other places in the world to develop that level of competency, K-12, and not for our students here in the U.S.? It's an asset. It should be embraced. Let's look at middle school and high school. We also have here this separation of instruction when it comes to the languages, a K-12 commitment in both of them. But here it looks a little different. And why? Because the realities of scheduling, the reality teachers that we have immediately at our fingertips, those tend to go ahead and shift us in certain ways. But here's an example of what would be some expectations at the middle school level. Required to take language arts in the target language from 6th to 8th grade. So language arts in SLA, language arts in ELA, in English, making sure that they have access to both of those, continuing to strengthen those competencies in that area. In addition to another core content course taught in the target language each year from 6th through 8th grade. So the piece that kind of stands out for us here at the high school level, a minimum of 8 credits in the target language over the course of 9th to 12th grade, including yearly language arts and core classes over the 4 years. My son right now, just to give you an example, each year he's a junior now. He started off taking Spanish language arts as well as, it was biology and Spanish. Then the next year he took world history, AP world history in Spanish, together with Spanish language arts. And this year he's taking AP American history, I believe. And it's in Spanish as well as the Spanish language arts. To give you a sense, it has to be that level of commitment. Sometimes it's kind of like who we have available, right? And that dictates what sort of content areas we can offer. This brings us to the guiding principles. You guys already mentioned who's aware of this. Just to let you know, they're in the process right now of updating the guiding principles. That doesn't mean that what's available should not be used. You definitely should use it. Take a look at it. It's available on the web. You could go to Cal. And I believe we have the website here in a few seconds. But just to let you know what the guiding principles are, in case you're not aware, it's broken up into 7 different strands: assessment and accountability. All the strands really represent and are parallel to what we talked about, what a quality dual language program should have. It speaks to curriculum, instruction, staff quality and professional development, program structure, family and community, and of course support and different resources that we should be thinking of. Section 1 is actually focused on review of research and best practices. This is one of the reasons why it's being updated. We need to begin to push into there, many of the best practices and research that have come about over the recent years. The Section 2 focuses on rubrics and descriptors, which is actually, you guys will see, those of you who were lucky enough to get those handouts, which by the way, we'll be happy to send them to you if you didn't. If you feel that they're useful, feel free to send us an email. We'll be happy to go ahead and send those to you. And then Section 3, of course, is the appendix, and it has some rating templates. And you guys will be looking at those as well shortly. Those of us who are much more visual learners, actually, I should back up. Here, I doubt if you can read it from back there, so I'm going to read it for you. Here's an example of a strand. It's strand 2, and it's focused on curriculum. And that strand is broken up into 3 different principles. And under those principles, you have key points. So each one of these principles has key points that we're trying to help you to really begin in a laser-like fashion to focus on and ask yourselves, what does this look like in our school? And rate yourselves. So that way you begin to define very clearly what are we going to begin to target and why. If you remember the quote a little bit earlier, we can't target everything, right? Attempting to target everything is a little difficult. We need to very clearly say, okay, which of all these areas, because we have a lot of areas that we can build upon, which one is going to give us the biggest push for our efforts and our focus? And that will really allow you, that kind of thought and that kind of reflection will allow you to really begin to target where you need to begin. So that way you don't have 5 different plates that you're trying to hold up. Focus on one plate and get that thing moving. Here is, I know it's long. When you go to cal.org and put in the search engine, guiding principles document, I believe. Guiding principles document, and it'll come up. It's free. Did you hear that? It's free. Those of you who didn't raise your hands earlier, download it. Just download that PDF and start looking at it and get to know it a little bit. I'm going to keep going. Started with New Mexico dual language program standards. In case you're curious, New Mexico had its hand in the development of these guiding principles. Our very own David Rogers is one of the co-authors, and he continues to be in a position of support and providing input for the new one and the latest one that's coming out. And of course, it's grounded in evidence from research and best practice. Things to consider for your novice and/or existing program.
Okay, so we're going to shift gears just a little bit, and we're going to start talking about what types of things do we need to be considering when we're talking about sustainability for our programs. The guiding principles have definitely been that one piece that has grounded me and my staffs in the different schools around dual language. What are those important pieces that we need to be considering? Adrian gave you guys the website. It's cal.org, but you can also, on Google, if you type guiding principles for dual language education, PDF, it's a PDF that you can download. So very useful tool, and again, all free. The new version, which will be coming out next year sometime, will also be free. That's one of the commitments that has been made by the group, is that they want to make sure that it's available so that it can be used widely the way it should be. So talking about sustainability, there are 5 different areas that we've kind of come up with in terms of what do we need to be doing, what do we need to be thinking about when we want to make sure that this program, which maybe has the right momentum going, and we want to make sure that it continues after we have those changes in our staffs, those lead teachers, maybe ourselves, district administration. It really is important to make sure you're grounded. So we look at structures. We want to make sure that there are certain structures that we're talking about that we have in place. Staff quality and professional development is another thing that came up through the conversations that you guys had. Curriculum, instruction, and assessment, also something very important that you guys identified, which we'll be getting into. Support and resources. What is it that's going to support your program to make sure that what your teachers are doing within the classroom is being supported on a larger scale so that they can do the job that they need to be doing? And then again, another point that came out, the family and community. You can't do this alone. You have to involve your communities, because the community is the reason you're doing the program. So you really need to have that inspiration. You really need to understand, as Adrian said, why are we doing this? What is the purpose? Why do we think that dual language is going to help us to get closer to solving the needs of our students? Michael Fullen, he's an author that talks about leadership, and in his work he talks about the intention to make a positive difference in the lives of the individuals, such as employees, clients, and society as a whole. You need to have that moral purpose as the foundation and the center of why you're creating a dual language program. Simon Sinek, if you're familiar with him, he's someone you can also look at a quick video online of, and he talks about the golden circle. So at the center of your circle is your why. And the way he explains that why is people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. You can tell everybody in the world, we have a dual language program. Great. But until you really understand, and your staff and your district understands why is it that we have it and what is core to us continuing this program, it's never going to survive. Your community will never be behind you unless they know why it is that you're doing it. So when we look at program structure, you have to identify the need and the purpose, as I mentioned, that how the why before the how in how you're doing it. So the stakeholders, something that was mentioned earlier, you have to do it for the right people, for the right reasons, in the right way. Your mission, we typically have schools go through the process of looking at those motivations, looking at your stakeholders, and coming up with some kind of a mission statement for your program so that it really grounds you in what you're doing. School-wide goals, you have to have goals around your program. There's things that you want to make sure you're doing in terms of your curriculum and instruction, your assessments, your training, all of those pieces, as well as your communication. The plan for the growth of the program. Maybe you're in the second year of your program, maybe you have kinder and first grade. You already need to be thinking about, do I have someone on staff that can fill that second grade position? And a long-term goal, you need to be thinking, when this is fully built out, what is our program going to look like, and how are we going to know that we're successful in getting there? Every one of these decisions has to be based on your population, and your populations are all different. So when we work with schools, they're all very customized, because we can't just give you a template that's going to work for everybody. It has to be specific to what your needs, your realities in your district look like. Some schools, like the school I was at previously, we were a K-8 dual language charter school. So we were able to make a decision as a staff that we wanted to go GLAD school-wide. How many of you guys are familiar with GLAD, Project GLAD? Quite a few of you guys. We have some sessions on that, but it's very interactive. And we found that's the best way for us to meet the needs of our students with the authority that we had to do that. Common commitments. What is it that you guys have all decided as a staff that are the most important pieces you're going to do in a consistent way? So in my school, we had a mission statement that really defined who our school was. Sienna's International School is a K-8 school with a focus on dual language instruction, inquiry, and environmental sustainability. Very direct. Sienna seeks to develop students who can ask and investigate important questions about the world around them, and are committed to sustainable society, and are working toward cross-cultural competence, bilingualism, and fluency in Spanish and English. This is something that